Hi everybody, this is an entry into Swamp Piper 84 Sub Gore. The picture I've shown you is of Norfolk Wherry. They were very well known, and there were many of them on the marshes and the rivers of Norfolk and going out to sea. And my grandfather, or my step-grandfather, Henry Waters, sorry, not Henry Waters, Thomas Waters, was a wherryman. He was a captain of wherries. His first wherries were James and Elizabeth, and he was the last master of John and Henry, who was owned by a firm called Cubits and Walker. One of his earlier relatives, Henry Waters, was master of the Four Friends, and then later on master of the Three Friends. Wherries were the carryalls of Norfolk. The roads weren't very good, and the best way to get around was using the rivers and the Broads, and the wherries would carry anything from corn, coal. They'd go out into the North Sea and bring back ice for the ice houses of the wealthy or for the businesses in Norwich. They would carry hay and bales of straw, so much so when they carried straw that you couldn't see the top of the mast for the straw. The wind pushed the boat with the straw, and sometimes they poled the boats by hand if the wind was against them or if there was no wind. And the sails, they were called the Black Sail Traders because they were based on the Viking ships. And when they came to a bridge, the tall sail would just fall backwards so that they could just go under the bridges. There's a bridge in Norfolk at Potterham. Most people who visit call it Potterheim, but it's Potterham. And I've seen the pleasure wherry, the Albion, the last working wherry, run that bridge. The pole came down and the wherry goes straight through. But the thing to remember is that there were only 3 inches on each side for that wherry to go through, and they had to hit the tide right. And if you hire one of the motorboats, one of the boats to take holiday on, and you go to Potterham, you're not allowed to go under the bridge. You have to wait for one of the pilots to take you under. So difficult is the running of that bridge. So to see a boat in full sails coming down, and suddenly the sail drops and the captain of the boat steers it between that little space, is something really spectacular. But the Waters family, my stepfather's family, go back to the furthest I've traced them back is to the 1600s, and they were still watermen. They still worked on rivers and that kind of thing. So it looks as if that side of the family really had followed the trade all their lives. My father never did. He broke horses. He was a very, very, very well known for breaking shire horses as a young man. And it is a young man's job, is that, because those horses are the big war horses. They used to carry the knights on armour. And until they're broken, so to speak, they're full of life, full of anger, and you easily end up with broken bones and bruised bodies. But my father, William Thomas Waters, was a very, very strong man. I've seen him lift a car out of a ditch while the people still sat in the car. But anyway, back to his father. He was one of those men who was self-taught. Thomas Waters, he might have gone to school, to the Dame School, but he certainly didn't stay there too long. He worked in a flour mill and would carry sacks on his back that weighed 16 stone. Now they aren't allowed to do that today. 16 stone of weight. It's one of the biggest sacks that you have to carry. I think his record was 26 stone. But the flour mill blew up. Flour was very combustible and dust. And after that he went to work on the wherries, as his family had always done. He also wrote for the local newspaper, the Eastern Daily Press. He wasn't a regular writer, but he would put in the occasional article. And he was always published. And he answered lots and lots of letters. And I think he was the one person that recognised within me some intelligence, because he would set me riddles to answer. Some of them were easy, but very much of the time. What's got 22 legs, 2 wings, and no head? You know, it was the local football team, that kind of thing. But he also used to question me about wildlife, about stuff around Norfolk. And I'd be about 5 or 6 when I answered those kind of questions. He had a remarkable laugh. It seemed to come from deep inside and was helped along by the rattle of his chest, as he was a lifelong smoker of a pipe. I think he was probably the first man that I ever saw smoking a pipe. I'm not sure he ever cleaned them. And he had one of those racks that was on the floor with 3 or 4 old pipes in, and he'd just reach down for one and fill it with his favourite baccy, which was 3 Nuns, Baby's Bottom, and Player's No Name, and I forget which other ones he used. But he was quite a character. Like my dad, like my stepfather, he was a very, very strong man in his day. And he lived life to the full. So much so that when he was in his 80s, early 90s, his home help was 26 years old, and he married her, much to the disgust of the family, because she got everything when he died. But that was the way he was. His first wife, Beth Shaber, she was about 5 foot tall, maybe a bit smaller. Again, an incredibly strong woman. She bore 4 children, I think. Certainly my dad and his brother, a sister, and I think there was another child as well. My dad, when he was born, was 14 pounds in weight. So if you can imagine a little woman having a baby that size, there must have been a lot about her. And she wasn't averse to using a stick on the sons. The 2 sons, Joseph and Tom, my dad, they had quite a rivalry going. And one day Joseph picked up a stick from the fence and trimmed it down and took it to his mother to beat my dad with. because my dad had got into trouble in the morning. And she thanked him greatly and said, but first I'd better try it out on you to see whether it works. So he ended up getting that stick. But my grandfather was just what I would call a Renaissance man. He looked very much like H.G. Wells, and was that same kind of wisdom and knowledge, wisdom of a countryman, self-taught. And yet, when he wrote to the papers, he wrote in the best English, using complicated words and language. And if he was complaining about something or was against something, his letters certainly shew it, and he held a lot of sway. When he died, the newspaper ran a whole page on him, saying how valuable he'd been to them and what kind of a man he was. So I'm sorry I haven't gone into great detail of pictures and that, and of editing. I know you'd have liked something like that, but I hope I've given you something of a video on history, the family history, the history of a wherry captain. They used to work hard. Some of them didn't drink that much, but some of them did drink. I don't know what Henry did, but I know one of his brothers, Jacob, the guy who put the car in the ditch that Dad lifted out, he was quite a character as well. And one of their other brothers, Leslie, died in the First World War in one of the great battles, and his grave is out in France. He never came back. I think that's all I want to say really about them. May you all be blessed. May you be blessed abundantly. And may your God always go with you.